So we're going to design a basic keyboard case. Obviously, once you've done your first design, you can just use that again and just change the dimensions, but we're going to run through the start to finish of how you would do that, just to show you some of the functions. So we'll just call it keyboard case test. Shallow lid, doesn't need to assign a customer. So yeah, we'll generate the model and then start adding all of the hardware. We'll stick with a standard plywood, 9.5 millimeters. We'll use single angle, we'll use standard hybrid. Now for this case, we'll be using a shallow lid. So I'm actually going to unlink the lid and base braces and only add base braces. So find a brace, and then same again, we can unlink the lid and base corners and choose a suitable corner for our lid, and then choose a suitable corner for the base. And we're going to generate this case now. This keyboard case will need edge casters. So once this case is generated, we can replace two of those corners. So what we'll do is we'll do that first, and then we'll sort out the sizing next. So we'll use our replace function, and I can multi-select those two corners. They'll go blue, and then hit my green tick, and I'm going to choose corner wheel, and then apply those. So we now have our corner wheels. We'll go to our dimensions. We'll choose something along the lines of 1500 millimeters. Depth is probably okay. Height, we only might need 200 millimeters, and we'll make our lid height smaller. Okay, so now we have a case that resembles a keyboard case, and we're going to put some latches on the front side. We'll use a medium latch. We'll use this one from Adam Hall for now. Select the front face, anchor it to the left hand side, and we'll start with a 100 millimeter gap. That's from the end of the plywood to the cutout at the moment, based on my settings here. Apply that and then mirror that latch. If we want to put some hinges on this back face, we can do that. We'll just use some mounted hinges for now. Select hinges for easier filtering. We'll find something like a P1995. So I want to place it on the back face, and then we'll start with the left-hand side. Place it as 100 millimeters from the center of that to the end of the plywood. And then we will do a mirror action. And then for now, we'll place a third one as well. If you know the code, just type it in. Select the back face again. I'll use the middle anchor, and I'm going to leave this right down the middle. So that will always stay in the middle. You might want to add some more. For extra strength, that's absolutely fine. So now we have two latches, three hinges, and we're going to add a single front handle. So what we're going to do is make sure we're on the front view. And then we'll use these briefcase handles for now. And here we have the option of the anchor points. So I'm going to keep it central, and we can either have it remembering its measurement from the very top, or from the split in the aluminium or the middle of the whole case, or from the bottom of the case. So what we'll do is we'll use the join as our reference point, and then we're just going to move this up onto the extrusion, keeping it central. place that. And then we need a handle on the opposite end for the pulling along element of this case. So we'll use a mounted flip handle. This one will work nicely. And again, we'll keep it referencing that split. So if we change the case size, it's always going to be just nicely below the aluminium, because I'm using the anchor point of the split. Whatever we do to the case size, this is always going to stay this measurement from here to the handle. Okay, so at this point, we have a very basic case coming together. We're going to save the project just to make sure that we don't lose any work. And then once it's saved, we can move on to the internals. So internal design, you can see the cutouts are appearing for the hardware. The cutouts for the plywood and the drill holes are all there. So if we want to put a compartment in this case, what we can use is a work plane to give us a design reference. And I'm going to click on this inside panel face. And I'm going to say I want to have a compartment size of 200 millimeters. So that currently is just a design work plane. I'm going to choose a partition. I'll use a raw plywood. I'm going to use a 12 millimeter. Click on this partition, click on the work plane, sorry. And what you'll see is that this partition is right down the middle of this work plane. But if we move that by using one of these buttons up here, we can now be sure that we're going to have 200 millimeters on this side of the partition. I'm going to increase the size from 450 to 458. That will force the partition to rebate itself 4 millimeters each side. Click edit and then back on the partition, click the top face. And I want this to be in line with the bottom of the case. So I've hidden the extrusion and I'm going to choose this face, and I've now snapped this face to this face. Apply that, and then we can turn our extrusion view back on. We have these filters up here so we can easily hide elements of the internal design for easier visibility. So we're now ready to give this a foam lining. However, I want to make sure I've got hand slots at either end of the main compartment. So what we're going to do is create a mid plane between the back face and the front inner face. We now have this mid plane running through. I'm just going to use that as a reference. I can now offset from this plane, and I'm going to take this 40 millimeters that way, and then I'm also going to create another one minus 40 millimeters going the other way. So we now have an 80 millimeter difference between those two outer work planes. I'm going to create just call that ref mid, give it any name you like, create that. I can now hide that middle work plane more easily. I can call this divide, click on that work plane and add it to the group. And if I want to, I can actually hide that divide work plane. So when it comes to adding foam into our case, go for a 25 millimeter would be a fairly good start. So we'll choose something like a plastizote. We're going to click on the back face, front face, and then maybe next we could put our lower face in. That's going to put a pad in the bottom. So we'll apply those just so you can see those going in. It's going to hide all the divides. So you can see how that's shaping up. Foam front and back and at the bottom. You can't see the foam that's in the foreground. So we're now going to place some foam at the ends, but leaving space for hands. So to do that, let's get our work planes back on. And then we can hide one we don't want. By setting up more work planes, you can do that more efficiently. But here we go. So 40mm foam, maybe either end. Let's use a 50mm for the purposes of this. It's fine. Now what we can do is click on this face, and that will place a full block. But we don't want a full block, so we're going to edit, and then select this end face, and then snap it to this work plane, the first work plane there. And then we can apply that. We can spin around and then add another 50mm foam, which I believe is this one. Click on that face and it will put it as big as it can go. But I'm going to go into my edit. And then I need to right click, select my custom graphics, which is the hidden face, and then this work plane here. And that is now snapped to this work plane. And we can do the same thing at the other end. We're going to choose a foam, same one again. Go into the edit mode. We can select the end face of the foam, reference it to this work plane, and then apply it. And then we can add the foam again. We can edit that piece of foam now that it's placed. We can select the custom graphic, which is that face at the end's gone blue, and choose the work plane and apply. And we now have 4 pieces of foam placed in the case, trimmed and referenced to these 2 work planes, meaning as this case changes size, you will always get an 80mm opening at the end there. And by editing these work planes, if we increase that to 50mm, that will move. And the foam has also moved as well. We can edit the other work plane to keep it symmetrical. 50mm also. And this foam adjusts as well. So now all that's left to really do is the lining in the compartment. Choose a nice thin foam, clicking around on each face, adding the foam, and then we can click on the base as well. And then apply that foam. I'll hide all the work planes. And you can now see that we have a compartment with a full 10mm or 13mm, foam lining, 12mm divide, and our foam blocks all referenced to the work planes. So if we bring our divide work plane back in, just as an example, we can edit that work plane to adjust the size of the compartment or the main compartment for the keyboard. So we could change this to 150, which is the measurement off of the original face, and everything will update. So that in a nutshell is a basic keyboard case. You could add some more foam in the lid, you could add some feet, extra handles, but once you have that, you can then use that easily to create many, many iterations of that same style.